Hola, buenos dias. Here we are in Cuba, not far from Holguin, and I'm going to share with you again one of my art travel films, and we're going to be painting in various mediums and methods again: pastel water, pastel over, acrylic, watercolour, mixed medium, and show you what can be done from a travel bag basically, and explore the island as well, give you a little bit of the island life as we do with the other films. So I don't actually smoke very much these days at all, so I just thought I'd get a few cigars for myself, and the drink, well, it's all free in the hotel. The hotel's very good, a bit noisy at night at times, but everything, it's all found, it's all in for the price, very, very good. It's a long flight over here from England, it's 10 hours, which is difficult on my back and legs, but well worth it now I've got here. And the snorkelling, as you'll see, is out of this world, with different types of fish. When you're actually out there underwater, the reef is very, very good just here, so I would thoroughly recommend it. Anyway, come share it with me. Let's have a go, shall we? But in the meantime,
well done, Liz. Another wonderful holiday you've arranged abroad. The last time we went was about 6 years ago to Barbados. We got a very good deal then, and Liz has managed to get a last minute deal for us for 2 weeks here now to Cuba. Another fantastic break, and she organises things so well. It's a long haul though. We need our 2 weeks because it's 5 hours down from Lincolnton to the airport, and then another 10-hour trip across on the plane. So a long haul flight, which is also not helped by quite narrow seats, but quite good in-flight entertainment. Did you just notice that PA in progress? Well, I don't think it's PA, I think it's PAIN in progress, the pain factor of such a long trip. The flight over was okay because the air conditioning was quite good, but the return flight was abysmal. A different design in the aircraft meant that the toilets were a long way down the back of the aircraft and down a flight of stairs as well, which is not good for my mobility problems. But otherwise things went very much to plan, and from the time we arrived until the time we departed, the reps looked after us very well. Although still a third world country, Cuba has invested very greatly in tourism recently, and the hotels are very, very good. In fact, the staff very friendly, the accommodation good, and the food excellent. We've booked for an all-inclusive holiday this time, one of the first I've done, so we can eat and drink as much as we want. Cuba is only a 3-hour flight from Canada and Quebec, so there are a lot of Quebecois and Canadians over there, some Germans and other nationalities, and English now becoming more popular and increasing. I felt that the gardens and hotels were very well laid out, the gardens very well kept as well. The people were bright and cheerful, friendly, and seemed in good health. There's a free health system and free education. Everybody looked well, but of course it is a poor country, and the difference in quality of life and the difference in the pay that they get there as to what we would expect is tremendous. When we went to visit the cigar factory, we noticed that they were getting about 1 convertible peso a day for a day's work, so it's almost sweatshop work. When we went on the little train, we paid 10 convertible pesos a person, and that was almost a month's wages. So 20 pesos convertible was the guide's wages for a month. So this makes you just realise what you're up against. It is rather sad. So tips are very welcome there, and any gifts as well. Any gifts you can take over of pencils or office materials, even leaving your towels behind, clothes, shirts, anything very welcome by the locals. The hotel facilities were good, the bars were always open, the pool was kept clean, the rooms were kept clean, and you noticed how delicately they placed the towels on the bed, making little swans out of them, which was rather attractive as well. Of course, Cuba is famous for its rum. So when the bar's being open all the time, one could not only have a rum and coke at any time, but of course a rum punch of many varieties whenever you wanted. I'd taken my maximum luggage allowance, and even then had to keep the art materials to a minimum. I'd taken some acrylic inks, my box of pastels and watercolours, watercolour paper and some pastel paper. Due to the flights, I'd also taken my older cameras, my older SLR, a Panasonic video recorder, and also a new camera I'm trying out, an Olympus Tough, which proved to be very, very good, and you'll see the underwater shots here, so I'm quite impressed with that. Whereas I would not recommend the Fuji cameras. My friend took one with her, and it filled with water after the first opening and recharging of the battery. I'd also had similar cameras earlier, different models, which had proved faulty as well. During my films I try to show you as broad an area of the countries I visit as possible, and try and choose subject matters that will typify those areas, whether it be boats or palm trees or lovely beaches, and I try to choose the mediums that I can take with me that will suit those, and mix the mediums as well. So what you have to bear in mind, please, and bear with me, is that I am filming on my own most of the time, and I can't film as professionally as I would if I were at home in the studio. But the point is, I am actually out there filming on the spot, painting on the spot, on plein air in reality. So hopefully you can share that experience with me and learn and gain as much as you can from that, and also enjoy the pleasure that I enjoyed doing it. I enjoy watching nature and natural history as well, not only the fish underwater, but here we see the small hole made by burrowing crabs on the beach. Apparently this time of year most of the butterflies are further inland and in the mountains, but there are still some lovely flowers here, many of which you'll recognise from house plants in England and conservatory plants, but here they're growing 4 or 5 times the size, and of course in this lovely warm climate, thoroughly enjoying it. This also meant that for hotel meals, at every mealtime there were wonderful fresh fruits, mangoes, guavas and pineapples. From what I gather, the arts are quite highly regarded in Cuba and the schools, and it is good to see very many craftsmen working, a lot of leather working and some wonderful wood carvings in the area as well. Another article worth viewing in the markets were the hand-dyed tie-and-dye dresses and the crocheted handmade dresses. If I saw a fault in these articles at all, it was that they were mass-produced and nearly always the same subject matter: small dragons, crabs, fish, some of them quite nice, but a little bit tacky at times. They need a bit of guidance, I think, in the education of what tourists actually want and the quality, although the craftsmanship side is excellent. I was impressed though by how the arts and quality of the arts came out in the architecture and the way things were built. They'd let the builders and architects obviously play with surfaces and the use of coral textures and making cement resemble wood and so on around the hotel. A lot of pattern work and some quite good art actually on the interior and on the walls as well. In fact, better art painted around the walls and the decoration of the hotels than I actually saw in actual paintings in the markets or anywhere else. These carvings being done on pieces of driftwood and dead trees on the beaches and around the hotel were very, very attractive, and in fact of a higher standard creatively than the stuff that was being turned out and sold in the markets, which is a pity. Neither did there appear to be any traditional markets for food and other natural produce. That seemed to be directly used by the producers and the gardens themselves. I was very pleased later to be invited to see a smallholding and how the locals did sustain themselves. I did manage to film that, and we'll show you later in this film. As you see, the food in the restaurants was excellent, with a huge variety and choice, very well cooked and presented, and certainly tastes for everybody. We also not only had the buffet restaurants, but there were 5 other restaurants in the hotel complexes that we could use with different themes, all of which were within the price. The only extra we paid once were the 10 pesetas to have a lobster. What I'll do is take a You get it right. Yeah. There you are, on film too. If you're a group of friends or a party goer, this is certainly the place to be. They do try to quieten down the hotels after 11 o'clock at night, but before that it's noise and music and dancing all the way through. With this in mind, it may not be the ideal place for a family holiday with young children. The musicians were of quite a high standard, and of course this was partly due to the fact that the exchangeable peseta was highly valued, and they could get the exchangeable peseta directly by working in the hotels. Regrettably, the high standard wasn't reflected in the hotel piano, which not only because of the climate, but because of wear and tear was virtually falling apart and sounded like a honky tonk, but still very good fun nonetheless. There were plenty of events organised by the hotel, in this case a beach party, and we see some of the native dances and songs passed down traditionally from ages past. Cubans are a very colourful people, not only with their clothing and designs, but also in their lifestyle and music. I mean, what else can one expect from a cross between an African and Spanish culture? Wonderful movers and dancers. Tourists are well catered for with trips as well. Quite a variation of trips ranging from inexpensive to a little bit more. The most expensive were the catamaran and visits to the special islands and seeing the dolphins, and also the deep sea trolling as well for marlin and tuna. Also there were cheaper trips to Holguin to see the cigar factory, and the cheapest of all to take a little train ride on the motorised train. We'll go on a trip later to Holguin and we'll go by steam train as well. But the hotel provided bicycles free that you could borrow all day. Also the pedalos were free, and you could take the local buses, open top buses, and this cheap little motorised train at only 10 pesetas for 2-hour trips across to the local fishing village. Begging wasn't too much of a problem. Obviously wherever you went, one or two people were asking for a peseta, and on one particular trip we were warned not to throw sweets at the children because a couple of party members were watching the situation as children were missing school just to get these offerings from the tourists. Just what would have happened if we'd thrown sweets, I've no idea. Anyway, let's get down to some painting now. We'll do our first one onto an acrylic ground on hot press watercolour paper and use pastels over the top of that. Providing you don't paint the acrylic paint too thickly and leave it as a matte, thin surface, the pastel takes on that colour very, very well. It's nice to have a dark background. It means you can block and blend very quickly, so I can block in the colours across the dark background and then smooth and blend them in with my fingers. These unison pastels are ideal for this and have some wonderful colour range of turquoises that are perfect for the Atlantic, Pacific and Caribbean coasts and colours like this. Remember that pastel works by reflecting light from the little granules, so if we flatten the pastel and blend it, or if we use water with it, and water will actually fix it as well, it's going to deaden it, the same as fixative will. So our first coats can be blended, but our final coats should be put on and left fresh and not touched at all. Here you see I've worked up my turquoise and then gone into a warmer greens and ultimately at the top. Come down into pinks and creams as I come down to the horizon, and then work a nice dark Prussian blue along the centre, coming into my turquoises and greens into the sea, feathering and blending and gradually stumbling over the surface, and as the painting progresses, working my darker colours and my highlights upwards. Not only is the camera work quite difficult working on my own for you, but also the light changes so much. In some of the paintings it may be difficult for you to see the detail and all of the work being done because of the sunlight shining through and making it very difficult for exposure on the camera. But here you can just see what's going on as I work up my darker and darker colours, and I work up the greens as well and more detail. We always work with the cooler colours in the background and more detail and warmer colours coming into the foreground. One of the only exceptions of that being a sunset, which I'm also going to show you later, where I do a sunset in just 30 minutes. I prepared all my materials beforehand, so the acrylic painting onto the paper was done before I even left England, dry and ready to go. The paper shape's ready. I even carried a piece of hardboard in my luggage, left that behind to make up the weight for the cigars I was bringing back again. And there we go, this pastel would have taken about an hour to complete. You have to work very quickly because of course you want to capture the light as an impressionist and capture the moment before it changes. Now let's take a look at one of the markets and what's on offer. As you see here, the standard of carving is quite high. It's just the actual objects that they're making may not quite be to many people's taste. The fish and the undersea things are rather pleasant and rather fun. The little crabs are rather fun. As an idea on price, you could pick up a cheap leather belt for about 3 pesetas, a good one for about 10, and a very nice handbag for about 20, so about 17 or 18 pounds to 20. Now another pastel done in the same method onto the acrylic ground. You can see the full range of pastels here, and the method is still the old English method of blocking and blending, of blocking on the colours and working up the basic and mid-tones, blending them in and then gradually working colours over the surface by blending and feathering, with the last coats eventually being nice and fresh and clean and the final detail. Obviously work like this is better with strong clean light where you get nice dark shadows and very bright highlights. For most of my holiday we had really good weather, but for the last 3 or 4 days it suddenly turned, as you'll see. To travel light, my little easel is very useful. You'll see me using it here. I've got a little 3-legged camping stool, my easel goes over my knees, 2 prongs go out, 2 legs onto the ground, and you can see my painting just leaning against the easel here on the sand. Wherever you go around the hotel complexes there'll be music playing somewhere, and very often some very good live bands. This is fine but could become a bit irritating at times when there's just too much loud music. But this did only seem to be for the tourists. When we visited the major cities and towns it wasn't quite so noticeable, and out in the country people were leading quite quiet and sedate lives and just surviving and enjoying their country ways with their chickens and their pigs and small holdings. But tourism is certainly playing a very major part for them also, whereas many of them are working half a day or some of the week with the hotels and in tourism, and the rest of the time managing the small holding. There's masses of lovely subject matter to work from. Here, for instance, we see the lovely gardens and flowers and light around the coast of the hotel. But also there were these lovely horses and carts and oxen and carts, and a lot of subject matter in the country and around the cities. It just wasn't so readily accessible and easily paintable for me. Having said that, I do hope at the end of this film to do several more paintings, back at home studio pieces from photographs, and one of those will be some oxen and a cart. The other I hope to do is a 3-piece triptych using low relief and working from the underwater scenes. This delightful pathway surrounded by flowers with the sea on my left and the fence going into perspective gave me a lovely composition for a painting. So let's have a go at that now. Again you see me using the acrylic ground again and the hot press paper, working out a very quick and light and basic simple composition with some lighter pastel at first and then gradually blocking and blending in the mid-tones. Once the background colours have been established, then we can gradually add more and more detail as we go along. If we start loose, then we can finish as tightly as we want. We're the ones in control. Here you can see just how handy my easel is with the two legs out and sitting on a local bench. Although I start from my mid-tones and work out each way, I'm not really painting tonally, I'm painting with, of course, colour. I'm working my cools against warms, my opposites in the colour circles one against another, the greens against the reds, the purples against the yellows and so on, to get this vibrancy and this light. The maximum amount of paintings I've done in one day was in New Zealand when I painted 7, including one full imperial work. Working in this way has a lot of advantages, but you can capture that light and you've got plenty of time in the rest of the day to do other things like going swimming, or now, as the sun sets and the beautiful sunsets there, we take a little horse and carriage and go off to another hotel for evening dinner. Yes, the hotels also had an arrangement where you could book to go to a different one and try a totally different restaurant and menu for the evening. Every evening there was entertainment at the bar, and in this case we had a wonderful couple of dancers come and show their skills. Non-American currency and credit cards could always be converted easily at the hotels. Cigars of varying quality could be purchased from both the markets and various shops. These cheaper cigars were 6 pesetas for 5. One could pay a great deal more for the top quality cigars, ranging between 100 and 200 pesetas for a box of 25. But it was possible to get some very, very good cash deals at a much reduced rate from the locals.
So where can I buy the matches? With the store matches? Oh, this is a gift shop from Cuba as well. Look. Anyone to come into this? Thank you.
Yeah.
Where are you?
Good. Very good. Thank you.
I found these lizards quite delightful. They reminded me of pug dogs with the little curly tails. This was an inlet I discovered on my bicycle rides, and later on with a return to paint some of these fishing boats in the traditional watercolour technique, as you'll see. The statue was of Christopher Columbus, the explorer to have discovered Cuba. Although there were rocky, low cliffs and areas that are not so easily approached for swimming, most of the beaches were beautiful white coral sand, which extended out 20 or 30 yards and then went into several hundred yards of small eel grass, then the old dead reef, and a matter of 300 yards out the new reef, which was quite incredible. You could walk your way out to that, but you needed shoes because of the sea urchins. So armed with a few rolls of bread from breakfast and my snorkel gear, off I go to explore the underwater here, and it's absolutely wonderful. This little grassy headland or promontory gave me a foreground in front of the long sweeping beach going away with palm trees on the right. So I thought I'd have a final go with my acrylic coated watercolour paper and do another pastel. Then I'd move on to mixed medium or the plain papers, water pastel and watercolour. Once again, the same blocking and blending and feathering, and you can also see how useful and versatile the easel and the little three-legged stool is. I can't stand for long periods of time or walk very far, so having something light to carry like this for mobility problems is very, very useful for me, but it'd be useful for anybody. I can't find these easels for sale now in this country. I was away in France 8 years, and when I came back I had people asking if I could get them. It seems strange that they've been discontinued because they're such a useful object. Let's hope we can get somebody to make them again, or somebody will supply them in the future. Here you see this method of my having made all of my mid-tones, and I'm now working out to the lighter ones and then into the darker ones at the very end. I also use the technique, the impressionist technique of broken colour, where I let one colour show through or between another to make the other seem brighter. So I'm not just mixing and blending colours, I'm also putting one colour next to another to give the illusion of a mixed colour. The work has to be fast and furious, so the pastels get into a right mess and there's no time to put them back individually as I go along. That all has to be done at the very end. I carried the paper over in ordinary plastic sleeving and just placed the pictures one on top of another gently in the bedroom, back in the sleeving, and carried them back flat in the case, and they didn't seem to come to any harm. Make sure you don't get heat stroke, of course. Take the proper suntan creams with you and also a straw hat, because the heat of that sun is quite great. There's always somebody ready and waiting to eat you if you drop dead. Here we have the vultures. There are a list of basic things one's warned about when going across to Cuba. One is advised not to hire cars or the little scooters. With this in mind, it's not that easy to get away from the tourist hotels and the resorts and get to little villages like this. There are some wonderful places out in the country and along the coast where things are still going on traditionally and far more picturesque. I had time to take this particular piece of film as I booked to go on a big game deep sea trolling trip, but unfortunately 2 of the 3 boats had broken down, so although the other guys got out, I didn't that day. So I spent the half an hour or so waiting for the return, filming this chap doing traditional fishing with his throw net. Again with the traditional fishing village in the background, and this is a subject matter that could make quite a nice painting at a later stage. Just for fun, I decided to set myself a wee challenge. In this very busy scene of the swimming pool, I thought I'd have a go at a very fast watercolour without working anything out, the barest of drawing, and not putting masking fluid or leaving light areas behind at all, just working in very loosely with light wetted to wets and washes of colour to get a vibrance and liveliness of the scene. I'm not sure how commercially viable it is, but a lot of painting is about fun, and this is why I did it, just purely to enjoy it and have a bit of fun. Now these wonderful sunsets we're getting there, let's have a go at doing one of those in pastel and water in fact in this case, and I produced this work in only 30 minutes flat. Some of the locals watching me quite amazed at the speed one can work in this way. As you see, I'm laying on the pastel first onto the hot press smooth watercolour paper, blending it straight in with the brush to give my background. As soon as it dries it is fixed, but it is rather dead, so we have to work the colours over the surface, but it's a lovely rapid and fluid way to work. It's also quite a versatile way to work as well, because if you make a mistake you can rub it back, you can wash it in with a brush, you can add lights and darks over the top. You can also use the brush to draw with. So for instance, if I wanted to put more detail in that is much finer than those heavy big pastels, I could use a brush to take some of the pigment onto the wet brush and then brush it on just like paint or watercolour. I quite like painting into the light because you see all sorts of colours that way, and you must really push the colours. So I started when the sun was a bit of a way above the horizon and did my basic background colours, and then having got all the foundation colours in, as the sun got lower and more rapid and the light changed and became more intense, I was also able to catch up with it and add my brighter colours and opposites one against another to try and get this effect of the sunlight. As a rule of thumb, if you want to see more colour, then open your eyes very, very widely. And if you want to see something as tone and cut colour down, then squint down more. In this case, with the light shining directly into my eyes, I didn't have to have my eyes wide open because that was being done for me. But I am playing with the opposites in the colour circle as well, and colour chemistry to get the effects of light here. Working in a similar way on a standard Ongres paper pad, I've managed to do sunsets like this in only 10 minutes flat, really blending and blocking so fast and getting these effects of light by scumbling. One of the reasons I like to have a base colour, even acrylic to start with, or blend in the pastel with water to give an undercoat, is because no paper is really colour fast. Even the pastels we've discovered will go lighter in direct sunlight when we've put paper over the top of half a page and left half a page showing. With that in mind, if we use pastel or paint underneath, then at least the undercolour has more of a chance. But if you use paper that's going to fade, then that will not glow through in the original intensity that you started with. And there we are, a pastel done from start to finish in 30 minutes, trying to capture the moment. And now the story about this little fishing village here, where I went and painted a more traditional but loose watercolour of the fishing boats. It wasn't long as I entered this little harbour and was allowed through by the locals that a young lad came along with his little folio of artwork to show me. He was clearly standing behind, hoping I'd notice him. In fact, I showed him how to use the camera, and he very quickly learnt and was soon filming me, as you'll see here. He was a gifted young student, and his drawings showed great capability, but it seemed, as I suspected, that they were very short of materials in the school. I gave him one of my brushes to help him out, took his address, and will later send him a small package of art materials which you cannot get in Cuba easily. Can't get oil paints at all, it seems. I also gave him 3 exchangeable pesetas to help him buy more materials later, and he gleefully came back with a little picture of his own of a cockerel from his garden. So I also have a lovely memento from one artist to another. In this case I'm using a £140 knot paper, so I'm able to do a little bit of dry brush work, as you can see as I go along. I put in the washes first, working my cerulean blue and then some cobalt down from top to middle, letting it blend in. Then I start to paint the individual parts of the boat separately, working some just wet straight onto the dry paper and some wet next to wet and blending. Once they've been achieved and the details done, then I can work around the boats by putting a wash in the background and working wet into wet for the water, gradually letting things dry, and as they dry, tightening up. Once things are dry, of course, and the drier they become, the more detail we can put in. And so the planks and rigging and final reflections are left right until the end. We want to keep the paint nice and clean, nice and fresh, direct brush strokes, single strokes, no prattling about, no fiddling, just put a red line in one stroke if one can, straight round. Although I do have masking fluid with me and some white gouache, I'm not going to use it in this particular painting. Of course there's no reason why I shouldn't, and if I want to I can. I've got my full brush set with me, so I've got all those tools to my use. But I only needed 2 or 3 brushes for this. In fact, I used my oval mop and just one small round to do the whole painting. At the end of this film I'm going to show you how to use the hake and a rigger or a small round to do a similar way of painting, more traditional again, the Ron Ranson style, of a small boat in the mangrove swamp. If you want to get the effect of this Atlantic type scene, the Mediterranean type colours, then you need to keep pure, clean colours. You need to be working with lovely, bright, pure, clean blues and greens. It's no good getting muddy for something like this. I think this very loose and lively way of working also reflects the scene that we're painting. Watercolour perhaps should be considered like a battle. You have to plan the battle out, you have to know where your soldiers are going to go, you have to look at where your lights are going to be left and where your darks are going to finish from the beginning. So take a little time to sit and look before you start painting. Don't just rush straight in. Well, there we go. There isn't a very great rise and fall of tide there, but enough that I only just finished in time and could only just get back across the little rock causeway without getting my feet saturated. The evening comes round again and it's time to choose a restaurant. In this case we chose the Bunny Moor. We had to book ahead and paid an extra 10 pesetas to have half a lobster each. Absolutely wonderful with the prawns and a black bean soup to start with. Delicious. And to prove the point, all the best cats in town know where to go. They've come for the various prawn heads and little bits that the customers throw to them, thoroughly enjoying this excellent cuisine. One of the inexpensive trips we decided to take was the small steam train, so a coach first to get the old small steam train that starts off at an old sugar factory. This then takes a few miles route through the countryside between houses, through sugarcane fields and traditional buildings. Traditional life, the poverty and some of the difficulties that still exist are quite clear though. There wasn't a toilet nearby for the tourists. I did discover this one, and as with several I've found around the countryside, no flushing system, just a bucket of water to go down and God knows where it went to. But otherwise the countryside was very, very clean, no litter about at all, and only one or two little bits of plastic in the sea fortunately.
Very good.
One of the highlights of going to Cuba must be viewing these vintage cars that are everywhere. Because of the lack of imports and having to keep all of these old models working, there's a wonderful collection of taxis and these cars that are in use day in, day out. Perhaps the communist regime is gradually relaxing more, but there are various rules and regulations about vehicles having to stop to pick up passengers en route. But it seems there's change in the wind. It hasn't been possible for Cubans to own their own properties, but now new laws are being made to enable them to purchase land and their own homes and sell them as well. So we'll see what the future holds. I can just get by with my French, having lived in France for 8 years, but my Spanish is very poor. Nonetheless, I manage to get by in most circumstances and make myself known.
Expectant. You want them. Yes, I know, but I haven't got any more. I wish I had.
The bicycles were great fun, and the landscape around there is fairly flat, so I could manage. The braking system's quite unusual and actually very efficient. You back pedal, which actually pushes the brakes on in an internal mechanism. Only a few hundred yards away from the hotel I managed to find this little oasis or pool where a white heron was fishing and some various waders. Not far away I discovered a track going round the back that led into some farm buildings and small holdings. People are ever so friendly and of course want to make a few bob where they can as well. And this gentleman came running out and offered to show me around his small holding and his home, which was very, very generous. He didn't ask for money, of course I was going to give him some later, but he took me around his small holding, his gardens, all of his various fruits, showing me how he ran this, and even introduced me to his wife, and at the end of the do got a coconut, cut it open and shared some milk with me. Cocoa yogurt?
Sí. Gallina.
Such things as washing machines, of course, are a great luxury. You see this old model here working outside. You'd have to last them a lifetime. You'd have to keep it going. So there's no expendable things that are just chucked away, as in our own society over here. Everything has to be kept going for as long as possible on the minimum of finance.
Papaya.
Joe worked on his small holdings in the morning and then worked at the hotels in the afternoon.
Plátano.
Plantain, yeah.
Tener más vitamina que banana. Más fuerte.
Garlic.
Especie.
Garlic
Sí.
cuisine, yeah. So the sugar cane. So these are the proper bananas,
Sí,
not the plantain.
Primero. Llamar café. Yo, Guantánamo, Santiago, Cuba, montaña.
So this is the first flower, yes.
Después,
After the flower, you cut it off at the bottom and the fruit grow down. It's a very hot pepper.
llamar limón.
Lemon.
Echarle a la carne,
Poison.
refresco, comida,
So little lemon tree.
ácido.
Young lime. Yeah, I think it's a lime rather than lemon, but it's good. Gracias. The plantation of the bananas, they're growing many herbs and trees. These beans.
Frijol.
Ah yes, the beans.
Hay distintos tipos.
Beans the same, they have red, white, black beans. For the sugar cane to go with the lime, I think.
Caña, azúcar.
So we try. We're going to have some sugar cane, which is very kindly.
Caña, azúcar.
Very sweet. We put a little of the lime on the sugar. We have the sweet and sour, which is absolutely delicious.
Sabroso.
Yeah, bueno.
Bueno. Y ahora sí, ensalada. Ella echa bastante.
This is for the root, yes. Excellent. Well, this is taro or?
Está ella a los tres meses.
So after 3.
Gorda. Pela, olla agua,
What?
candela.
Cook that with water and oil.
Potaja, sopa, vianda.
Well,
Llamar mango.
mango, yes. So mango flowers.
Está pariendo, después echa ahí.
The little seeds of the mango, yes. Sucre, yes. Okay. I make the hedge of the cactus.
Pintura.
Use this for painting because of the red dye. So we have the terrapins. One is the papaya.
Papaya.
He's going to give me the agua de coconut, which is very good.
¿Me cocido bien?
Muchas gracias. No.
Ya.
Peter, Joe,
Sí.
your name?
Que hable.
Esposa. Diana.
Velázquez.
Esposa. Yo, Orlando Parra. Orlando.
Muchas gracias. Okay, for this painting of these oxen in Cuba, I'm going to do this for you just with 4 colours only: burnt sienna, raw sienna, ultramarine and Prussian blue. And this limited palette should give us all of the colours we require for this if we use it subtly and carefully. I'm going to be using my oval mop at first, and then a little round, and finish off possibly with a flat as well, just to get some more texture on this knot paper. I just want to keep it very tonal and fairly simple. So I'm going to start off with the raw sienna, giving a variegated wash throughout. In other words, I want a very light sienna in places and stronger sienna in others, and to leave some of the light areas behind. And I'm going to try and keep to fairly loose brushwork once I've got the washes done. So the first thing is to lay on this variegated light wash, let it dry, and then gradually as it dries work up wet into wet and the colours over the top. Even the blue of the sky. And raw sienna, the beauty of raw sienna is that it's a transparent colour. Try a lovely transparent light yellow. We'll work right the way through, leaving some light areas on the roof there. Where there are light areas, let's leave them. For instance, this guy's shirt is white. A bit of dry brushwork over it. With some very dark areas in here later as well. I'm going to come back into that with more colour later. A bit of dry brushwork through here. Now the cattle themselves. Medium tone of this first of all, which is lighter there. Right, that's established the creamy colours through here. I'm going to warm that up just a little bit. Just make that a little bit warmer with the burnt sienna. So when we say burnt umber or burnt sienna, umber is the earth umber and sienna is the earth from sienna, and when it's burnt it of course has been just that, it has been burnt slightly. And usually when you burn something it tends to go a bit redder.
So that's what we've got here, and it's going to be the same up here on the roof. Just going to skim some burnt sienna across that roof just to get the feel of it. Same behind here, we'll just get an indication of that roof there to the other warms. Right, that's okay. Now onto these oxen again. We want to be a bit warmer there too, so let's, well, we've got a graduated wash going on. We're graduating, we're dropping in wet into wet to give a graduated colour here. Same for this oxen here, a little bit more warmth down around the face. So we're letting the wet into wet do the work here now. Lovely and warm going through there. Let it spread out softly. And you see by using this technique how easy it is to make a form. And these are our warm colours. I haven't yet even gone into the cools, so I'm going to add into this again shortly. So as it's drying on the paper, so I'm also able to make harder edges and make things darker and darker and darker. A little bit of water there, and let's just scumble that round, just dry brush it round the animal a little. Now we've started to do some of, while we've got the wet paint on here, we need to start doing some of the cooler colours into it as well. Just going to blend that down a little softer, let that dry a fraction, not much more, just a little bit. While it's drying, I'm going to go back onto the suntan of the figure here, and he's quite a bit warmer, so we'll take a small round brush and just paint in some of the flesh tone on him, leaving a little bit of light highlight here and there. I'll go a bit stronger, and I'm going to start on these cools now. I'm going to take some of the ultramarine and add that in with the burnt sienna and just come back up into this face and let that drop down right down the front of his face here to give the shadow. Easy as that. And a touch more of that blue, just a touch more, just at the very top edge at the back of his head here. And this cool colour we were just using with the burnt sienna, we need to now start working into the forms of the oxen, taking them right down a tone to get the shadowed area against that one there. Using a clean brush, a little bit of water, we can just blend that down and in and let it soften. See how simply we're painting this, keeping it just a very simple basic brushwork and shapes. So I'm going to take that away just a bit, just suck some of that paint away, because it's working on the vertical and I should be working on the flat really for a job like this. It's tending to drop down a bit, and this is a cool. This is more blue just here, so I'm going to use a bit of the blue thinly, my ultramarine blue, just to link into the nose there, and now lift away that bit. Right, carrying on then, down around here, just into those areas like that. Remember, where there's bright light, you'll get very strong contrasts in tone. So at the moment, we're just building up these tones. It's not too bright. You'll notice now we're getting hard edges because the paint has dried enough. There's a slightly lighter area of pigmentation on the skin and underneath here as well. So we can lift out and put it back again as we want. And we'll do a bit darker in there when it's a bit drier. Now this one here, it's the same, but he's a bit warmer. So against dark, dark against light, cool against warm, rough against smooth. I've got all of these things in the armoury still. And don't worry if something like this happens where it's dribbled down here a bit. We can still, because we're working on the vertical, that's why it is, but we can easily come back in and take it down, or take it off. That needs working down and making darker there anyway. And that in fact needs taking away a bit, so we'll just lift that. And with a little bit of clean water we can remove that completely. Look, just lift it out of the way. There we are. Now, we're going to get darker and darker into this, so as it's drying off and we've got more control, I'm able to come back into it carefully and drop in areas like that for the eye and gradually tickle out the darker parts where the nose is here. Very subtle, these little changes of colour and warmth and cool. Now, because it's on the vertical, we've got some of these things running down. I need to tidy that up, so let's take that away and dry it out. So our oxen are basically in and done. We need to go a little bit darker here and there, but not too much. We'll do that darkness now, just on the edge of the knee here, down to the knee, and then it starts again here. It drops right down to the dark of that foot and just down there. So we've done that with a minimum of fuss. Got our effects. This is all of course drying off nicely now as well. Let's go back up to our little figure here. Because he's drier now, I can just paint a little bit more detail in, and not too much. Now his shirt is a very slight tint of blue, it's a bluey grey, so we're going to give him a thin wash of ultramarine now, just like that, look. And it's slightly warmer as it comes down into his trousers. So the ultramarine still. We're not going to change colours. I'm going to do everything with these 4 colours I showed you. Okay, let's start to look at some of these areas now. Now, coming across here we've got a similar blue-grey to the shirt he's wearing. So behind him here we've got a blue-grey panel coming right through there. Keep it simple. Wagon. Down that side of it as well. To cool. So this is our ultramarine with a tiny touch of the burnt sienna. And now we want the darks there. Just a little touch of warm in that. Better off with the round brush, but I could use a flat for this job, couldn't I? And the tyre is fairly cool, quite a blue, with little bits of light shining down it. It's a little bit warmer inside than on the outside because of all the old rust here, look. A bit of dry brush work just to flick around there and then cooler to that corner. We can go darker yet, we haven't used our very darks, we haven't even used our Prussian yet. I'm talking about the Prussian. While I've got some on my brush, I'm just going to go back in with the Prussian into there and just show you how dark we can go using the Prussian now. So Prussian and a little touch of the burnt sienna, and let's just drop back in there that darker colour we wanted there for the knee of the oxen, and that very deep bit in the cleft of the hoof. And a little bit round in the eye there, and the shadow. You see how much deeper we can suddenly go. And at this edge, underneath there, soft clean water, just to blend that in. There's little details here that we can just start to put in now. We're actually at the detail stage. So the stronger we make these tones, then the more sunlight there will appear to be really black into here in this shape. We're going to paint lights against darks here, remember. let that come out, shadow here, it comes out there. Again, let the dry brush do the job. Very darks, which we can thoroughly enjoy. I'm going to use a little bit of the blending now just to bring that back up and in. We'll just feel the edge of the tire a bit there. Right under there. And while we're at it now, let's make some of that ultramarine and sienna again. And we'll look at the shadow here. Ultramarine, sienna, lovely mix. Let's look at the shadow there. It comes right around, right up into here. Deliberately letting it blend. A bit of dry brush work. So keep it simple. Put the colour on, leave it alone. Dark behind the legs of the beast here. The whole of that is painted in. A dark shape against a light, which is called a negative shape. A dark against a light, a negative shape. I hope you're enjoying this. It's a lovely painting to do. It's a really enjoyable one to do. Quite different to what you see me normally doing, as you notice. But I like to, although the style is the same, the techniques vary slightly. It's still me painting. And we've got some shadow going on and some texturing. And a bit of stone, bit of rock. And that just comes forward there, a bit of shadow under that beast. To let the brush come across in dry brush work here first, and then come back in with a bit more paint in a moment to strengthen that up. The same mixture but a little bit stronger. Going on behind these bits of old fence work. Now I want to go much darker, so I'm taking my Prussian blue and some of the burnt sienna, and I want to come back into some of these areas here where it was much darker. The lovely effects we can get in there now, and we've got shadows coming down here, so in here with this lovely dark warm, and just indicating what's going on underneath the tractor there, underneath the cart, the cart. And a bit of dry brush work just to get some of these darks established, and that can just be blended down around him. He's blue, so a little thin coat of blue there, and just make it a bit stronger where the shadow is here. Now, coming back to this chap, there are some shadows on him, creases in the clothing that we haven't got yet, so now's the time for that. So I put the wet into wet there and let that just travel around that bit. The other details, end of his knee. And we're painting in a fairly impressionist way, aren't we, on that? Let's have a look at some of these greens, because we haven't tried to make a green yet. Let's have the yellow, which is our raw sienna, and drop into that a little touch of the ultramarine, and we should get a slightly green tint. Here we go. It's not very strong, but it's strong enough just to a greener colour and still keep this lovely limited palette that we're using. You see, I'm still using the dry brush effect. so raw sienna and a little touch of ultramarine to give us this green for our distance, and all the way around this guy's hat. I'm going to drop some more wet into this in just a moment. Using the edge of the brush, twisting it and twirling it to get the feeling of these branches behind. So just 4 colours, all we're going to need to do this painting with. Lovely way to paint, limited palette. I mean, if you can use a limited palette, then you'll be able to use more colours, obviously, more strongly. If you can't use a few colours well, how do you intend using a lot of colours well? So this is a good idea to teach you to use colours. Just cool around there in the background, make those stand out a bit more. Now I'm now playing the dark against the lights and the cools against the warms. Need to bring some of these darks just into this a little bit more. Now let's deepen those greens down that we're just doing. Take a little of the Prussian and now add that to the raw sienna. And we'll go around that white hat again. Let the paper do the work, let the brush and the paper, controlled accident, do a bit of the work. Just simple brushwork. I've only needed 2 brushes through all of this so far. And the palm trees back there. Just the tip of the brush. Beautiful these oval mops because you can move them, you can make them into a point or a blade, or you can paint overall very, very roughly with them like that. Now we just soften that down. And this guy actually behind here with his blue shirt, we need to put some of that blue coming down through there. It'll make more sense in a minute when I've done a bit more. Playing lights against darks, darks against lights, rough against smooth still. We're still playing all these opposites to get this effect of light back here. Now, what we were doing was working our mid-greens over there. Let's go back to that again, where we got rather carried away for a moment. That's where I was. Just working out these darks and lights here. Very, very loosely, all the lights and very, very light area there that comes down from a very dark area here. Over the background of into that tree. Some lovely, lovely rich darks happening as this tree comes up behind the oxen here. And down into those leaves, wet into wet effects. Same here. Showing in between. Lovely way to paint. Lovely way to paint anyway, but just a lovely way to paint trees too, isn't it? Really get wet into wet darks there. Some of it quite warm. Brush touch the paper, only touch the paper to give the speckled effect. The darks on there. Right, we're down to our last stages in this one now. We've been using the big mop. Now I'm going to go down and finish off with the round, just to bring out some of the darks and lights in places, just to highlight the warms and cools in spots like that, because there are very strong lights and darks, as I say, when it's as bright and sunlit as this. Just a bit of plant life under there, just dotting a few I's and crossing a few T's really, isn't it? Perhaps the same here, just a little bit. We just have an indication of some of these tiles going across here. Just to indicate them. We're not going to paint them all in. But it gives us a different texture. Like I say, the cool against warm, the rough against the smooth. Gives us a different texture. There's an arm coming through here. Now, finally, we just play with a little bit of a bit more dry brush work. Do we need to do much more? We've got a fresh little watercolour that doesn't want to be played with too much. So it's just little bits of drawing really now, it's nothing serious. And there we are, we could leave that alone at that, I think. Just little indications of texture maybe, just to finish off here and there. But I'm just going to go back up into there a moment. I just want to see if I can add something a little more dark just into there. Not a lot, but just a little more texture on those leaves. So it's these different textures and warms and cools that are going to help make it. So, well, I know what I didn't do. I was going to put a little bit more yellow up into there, the raw sienna, just a little bit more of the palm trees here. Having said that, of course, then it probably needs a little more blues underneath that to make those seem greener. There we go, that'll do. And now, to finally finish off, we just need to take some of the ultramarine, and I haven't done the sky. I'd like to put a thin wash of blue down here, all the way down, and then just blend that in. And that will just make the yellow in the foreground stand out more. Then I continued on my bike ride along the coast road and went back to the little fishing village to have a closer look at that little boat in the mangrove swamp that I wanted to paint later. You're looking for a place to paint, and you come across a little boat like this in the mangrove, and then you begin to think your luck's changed. What a superb little spot, isn't it? In doing so, I came across another couple of boats that were dragged up on the beach on the opposite side, and in fact I also finished up painting those in pastel before I did the watercolour of the one in the mangrove swamps. Although I didn't come across any private restaurants there because the hotels had their own, they did some excellent fish dishes. I'm talking about fishing. Here's something I'd always wanted to do all of my life: go out for the big game, go out for the marlin. Unfortunately, I do tend to get seasick, and I'd chosen days when I knew the weather wasn't going to be too bad or the winds lighter. Unfortunately, the boats either broke down or the timetable was changed, and I finished up going out in an afternoon where the sea got very rough towards later in the day. I managed 2.5 hours of the 3-hour trip. But we had to come in early, and the other boat came in just before us with another person being seasick on that as well. We had a good time. They caught one yellow dolphin. We didn't have any bites, unfortunately, but it's that's the way things go. Many people take 2 or 3, 4, 5 trips, go out over and over again and never catch anything. But even though it was a bit rough, at least I'd made the attempt, had a go, and we had a chance, so it was good fun. I'm glad I went.
Enseguida voy a ver. Dale, dale, ok, ahora, pitch on back, the pad, the base, ir contigo, slowly, dale, slowly, ok.
So here we are out after the tuna, a little bit of a chop, but there's always a chance, you never know. At last we got out here. My sea legs yet. But I've got some nice film and I've always wanted to do this.
Even though I didn't catch anything on the big game trip, you'll have seen in my other films I always managed to catch something somehow, somewhere. So I had my extending rod with me and took one of the peddlers out and had a go at fishing for some of these fish that were going mad over the bread earlier. They were cleverer than I expected. With light tackle I could have taken some of the larger fish from the surface, but they could see the heavier line and wouldn't take it. But I did manage to catch a couple of specimens that were good fun. Of course I returned them. Little golden grain. Now something a bit different, a little wrasse of some sort, very colourful as you can see, with its pink. I think this local young fella did better than me though, all the same. Good catch, winner! As I said earlier, the arts, music and culture are highly valued in the country. We were invited, free again by the hotel, to enjoy some cheese and wine and listen to this group playing some beautiful music.
Is it mostly modern music, or do you do classical as well?
It's classical music, yes.
Yes, this is fun.
Yes.
Regrettably, this calm weather wasn't to last forever, so we had to make the most of it. As I say, the last 3 days you'll see on the film, and we almost turned into tropical storms. A rather fun and inexpensive trip was to take the little motorised train for a 2-hour journey down to the local fishing village. This was an excellent idea to get some good camera shots and video work as well, as of course the little train wasn't travelling too quickly. The buildings are very basic, as you see, some with palm roofs, some with tin, all having electricity, not many with water. Water often had to be brought in by tanker, and with the electricity, what one noticed was that although all the houses had only the very basics, most seemed to have TVs if nothing else. But everybody we saw looked very healthy and the lifestyle seemed to be good. These guys, though, were drinking the local hooch. This time a very fast painting using water and pastel on £140 Arches hot press paper.
Try and get it in before he goes anywhere. Right, now we need to get in the background as quickly as possible. Just give it a wash of water and pastel, just to get this area in before he disappears. All of this dark and light background which I can come into with pastel afterwards once I've got the basics on. Quite light there against the boat. It's very light across top of that. Bit of cool colour going on here. These worms. Just a little bit into the boat. Just pull it forward a bit. While we're at it, we'll come back to the orange here too, because it's as yellow there. Back to have some water. Very warm colours amongst these as well. Browns. All the paintwork's been pulled away. Got quite a light colour coming underneath the boat there. The propeller. There's some light areas through there as well. But, the dark comes right through inside the boat just there. So he's painting sideways on here or whatever.
Now that we've got most of the salient points and important details done in case that boat did go, I can start getting down to some of the details. I can do the highlights and scumbling across the surfaces of the sky and the leaves, and also putting the brighter colours on things like the rooftop and so on. As I say, I tend to work my mid-tones towards my light and darks, and now you can see that having got the foundation in, I'm now putting in the darks of the palm trees in the background, and I can then work on all the reflections and highlights in the water, little speckles of light catching the tips of the waves. Here I am pointing out how the green seems to come right the way through the painting, helping to hold the whole composition together, because this reflects in the water and comes right the way through the leaves and even a little bit into the sky. The little square pastel that I'm now going to use to go over the surface of the sky is an Inscribe, one of the cheaper pastels. Because it's slightly harder, it only puts a very, very light coat on. I could use a softer pastel, but it would be the danger of using too much. So when I put that pink on, I can put a little bit of ultramarine in, and then I blend that in with my fingers, and also then go over it again with some of the cerulean, with some of the turquoise blues, to help blend and smooth that in. But it's also still using pure colour. It means I'm still getting the bright effects and not killing it or deadening it by just rubbing the surface down. Fresh colour placed on will give that lovely bright effect that you want from pastel. You don't want to rub it and keep rubbing it.
Finishing off now, a little bit in the boat and wood stuck under here. We're going to do a fairly traditional watercolour using these tones, these lovely reflections, while we've still got the water which is going down, so I've got to work fairly quickly. I've done a quick sketch, as you can see here, and I'm ready now to go ahead. I'm going to put some masking fluid on first, some Pelibo, just on some of the light edges on the trees and things here. Masking fluid I'm using is the Pebeo again. I'm using it where these lighter areas are along the stakes and the edge of the boat, and the twigs in the background in the mangrove. So you can see already on the picture here where these blue areas are. This is where I'm putting in the masking fluid. Right, my drawing is done, and all the masking fluid laid on. You can see I've been using a clay shaper here, and I'm putting all the highlights of the little twigs and branches in the background when the darks are painted on to rub out later. And the clay shaper, one of the beauties of the clay shaper is that you can actually rub off at the end of it, rubber clay shaper, the masking fluid, and it doesn't ruin your brushes. So quite a useful little tool, these clay shapers, quite cheap to buy. This one's a chisel end. Unfortunately today I seem to have chosen the one day that's going to be very grey, so the tones aren't as sharp as I would like. The brighter the sun, of course, the greater graduation we have between darks and lights. But here it's just very, very close in tone. You can see the clouds today are very, almost like an English day, and I'm hoping it's not going to rain on me, which is not so good. But still a lovely scene, although it might be a bit flat on the painting. down in these tiny holes in the sand. Little tiny crabs are coming out. Of course, it looks like a year ago. Just got to wait for the masking fluid to dry at the moment. It's getting a bit windy. Just very, very flat now with all the grey sky, so we'll wander about a bit and see if the weather changes. Still far too much wind and dark skies yet to paint. It's now a tropical deluge around me, and I'm sitting fairly dry on the bridge. It's blowing almost horizontally, so I'm getting a little bit of water coming at me now. The wind has dropped some now, and it's raining a little less, but the problem is the river is coming up. I'm just hoping my shelter is going to be okay for a bit. Looks like it's clearing up enough for me to depart. I won't do any more on this watercolour today, obviously. I'm going to do something back in the room and show you a different idea we can use, and then we'll come back to this tomorrow. Well, needs must, and the rain has stopped play, so I've come indoors now, and I haven't got another a spare drawing board, so I've set up my suitcase and simply taped some paper to that, and I will now work off the back of the camera and make up a composition of 2 or 3 of these boats to do very loosely in watercolour and acrylic inks. For a basic composition, now I've got to try and quite loosely work up the figure. I'm going to use both watercolours and acrylic inks. I'm going to start off with these on the figure. Using a sword brush in this case. I'm going to paint this figure first, and then work loosely around it. I want to keep to fairly simple block shapes. Try and keep to nice simple brush strokes, just 1 or 2 strokes to see what I want to say. Light against the dark there. I'm going to put some cadmium orange in first, quite strongly. Then drop in some bright red. And behind that bring in some rose again. Nice and strong. And to work on the bedside table, very improvised but needs must. We've got our mast and figure. On the other boat, a bit the same. We need to paint in some of the darks here. And the same under here as well. Suddenly we'll hit the wet paint and it'll just flood up into it, look. And there's our shadow. We've got shadow coming out here from the boat. There's some shadow there in between there as well. Blue on the lettering there. Some deeper blue on the lettering on the side. And it's spread out with a nice effect. Alright. What I'm going to do now is the sky coming down in graduation, so I'm going to wet the paper first and bring my blues all the way down. To wet the paper wherever the sail isn't, all the way down to there, blue, and go all the way along the top and let that spread down on its own with lovely effects. Look, right from here downwards. Beautiful abstract effects we can get, so nice and strong at the top, letting it spread down through. Same here, all the way along there, around the sails down here. Put more in, really get it nice and strong. And then I'm going to go into my cerulean, which I've got set up here. Try and lose that, and then we'll bring the cerulean down. Although actually this isn't doing a bad job anyway. And a nice strong colour right down to the horizon. Prussian blue from the watercolour and blink that in there. I really do want to get some nice darks glowing down here. The reason being, when I put the lighter colours for the sails on, I want this to show up. Well, the paint's still not dry, but I'm not too worried because I want to go straight in and get some of these yellows in here. I want a really bright yellow ink all the way down. And using watercolour into the inks, we'll just spread that red really brightly into there. Give this feeling of a really hot summer, sunny day, and we can get the oranges we need. Now the turquoise down the side of this sail here. We don't have to copy the thing, do it as we want. Let's go back to this other sail over here now. This small sail here. Go back to that one on there. I want a very deep blue at the top of that sail. I think you might even drop a bit of purple into this sail. I really enjoy some colour. Take a bit of light showing down there. Let's make a lovely deep purple to really get the effect of that deep blue purple. So we're now working on this bit of the sail there. I'm going to take one of our nicest colours of the watercolour, the ultramarine. This ultramarine blue now, and just look at how that can be dropped into, just to really make that lovely deep blue look we get there, coming down into the pedalo here. Plenty of it, but really enjoy spreading the paint around a bit. No worry. White on it now, so we're going to try a bit of pastel just to liven things up. Okay, so the idea now is to use some of these lovely colours. A tad of blue along there, just to some of this turquoise to the sea. And that's about it. Just link some of the cools down through. They have a nice bright lively colour here in the foreground. There we go. We've got that colour on there, we'll just add a little bit of that to the sand. Just to brighten things up a bit. And that'll do us. There we are then. Well, the weather has improved in that it's a little lighter and but still very, very windy, so I don't think I can go down and finish this last watercolour off. I'm going to sit here in front of the window and the view out and finish the watercolour off here, because the reflections on the actual camera and the shot I have are better than being down there in the wind. As you see, we have the drawing finished and the masking fluid is now dried, obviously since yesterday. So let's start on the sky. Now I think we'll have a little bit of blue along here, but not much. I've got to try and work from the image that's on the camera here, which isn't easy. But it was taken when it was lighter and still a day. What I'm going to do is use my hake brush. Use my hake brush for this at the moment, and just wet the paper slightly. Give me some soft edges all the way down here. I'm working very much as I would do there anyway. I'm going to leave a lighter edge up here and then go bluer as it goes up. So I'm going to put a little bit of raw sienna into that wash. Just give it a slight tint of colour. Just a little tint there of raw sienna. And then come up into my cerulean. It's a very light sky. And just dab in some cerulean there, leaving some fluffy white clouds behind. And I'm going to put a little more darker blue in as well. So the trees finish around here. All blue along there, and we'll just let that spread down into here, leaving a light fluffy edge to that, and a little bit more blue, and a little bit of cobalt blue up into here to give just a little bit more colour. Which aren't very strong as the ultramarine up here, just a few dabs of cobalt, which will dry lighter, remember with the watercolour, it was always dry lighter than when we first put them on, so we'll just let that gently soak in so we get this fluffy cloud effect. Bring it up to the edge here. There we go. As simple as that. So that was a little raw sienna, which is a more transparent form of yellow ochre if you like. And then a little touch of cerulean, and then onto our cobalt, just to drop in a little more there. There we go. Now that's our sky done, as simple as that. Now let's look at this background here of these greens. And again, I'm going to do a very soft wet into wet effect here, and I've already got my masking fluids in, so I can go back into those later. Oops, I don't want that happening. There's some paint just trying to trickle down here and escape, just pick it off. That's it, because I'm working on the vertical here. So the green, I'm going to make that with some chrome yellow and a little ultramarine. Which will be quite a dark green. I'm going to start off with it fairly yellow because I want to catch the sunlight and drop the darker green in later. So fairly yellow, very warm yellowy green coming up through here. Right up and behind the boat there. Check with the boat later. It comes right through here. First of all, just to give a wash, I'm going to use the effects of the rough paper that we're using here with the watercolour today. Fairly yellow with the chrome yellow through here. I was going to put a palm tree in there, but I'm not going to now. It comes along there, go right through the palm tree, don't worry about that. Bring it out later, and that yellow down into the palm tree in fact. The grasses come out here. Now, if I've got that effect, I can make the deeper green to softly drop into it in that background. It's down there in fact. So we're getting this soft edged distance. So I'm going to add some more of the ultramarine to that yellow now to make the green much stronger and more bluey. But still quite a deep bluey green. And just drop in those softly like that to get the effect of these trees and the light shining up behind, and leave that tree standing out. Just use the end of the paintbrush, which is slightly broken, to get this soft furry effect of wet into wet. You see, is rather fun. Right up through here. Let the light just catch, and let the paint do the work of giving us this effect of that tree behind. And we'll go darker and darker yet. Just drop in these first of all, and we'll get some deeper tones going on as well. So I know it's going to dry lighter than this. And there amongst these darks again. These textures, these layers of trees coming one in front of another. So ultramarine blue and a little touch of burnt sienna, just to warm it up a bit and give me some of these very darks. And gradually tickle on those leaves, and I've worked from the chrome yellow and ultramarine into a little bit of sap green, and then my ultramarine and a little bit of burnt sienna, and as it dries we get harder and harder edges as we have to the leaves at the top here. Later on I can go back in and put a few harder leaves on there again if I wish to, with the same technique when it's dry. Now we're going to move on down to the boat. Now with the boat I'm going to work on with two smaller brushes, two rounds. A number 6 here and a number 2, doing the thinner branches at the end, and then the number 6 is a good one for doing just overall details on something like the boat or the main branches as I go along. So let's look at this boat and the way that it goes from darker to lighter here, and it's a slightly yellowy tint, so I'm going to use again some chrome yellow on that and just build it up across here. First of all, and the chrome yellow of course is quite a warm yellow. Doing some dry brush work a bit later. When I come to the front of the boat, the bow of the boat, I'm going to use a lighter yellow, some aureolin, which is a cooler yellow, and graduate that back across there. See a little bit of light showing. I'll do the same up here. I'm going to use a slightly warmer yellow into that. And go to my raw sienna at the top bit here. Actually up there we've got some darker areas inside it. To use some cobalt violet into the yellow here, just to tone that down a bit. And then go cooler still with some of the cerulean towards the bottom, giving it some shade. Just drop down. Just get some tone going in, a little ultramarine going in there now. Around here, around that edge. And on the side, oh god, bloody camera switched on again. Now a little burnt sienna and ultramarine, just to paint the darker area inside here, to the bow of the boat. A bit darker still with the burnt sienna, right up into the bow there. And while I'm at it, it's on the brush along the bottom here, so it's quite dark. Not all that easy to see because of the scale on the camera, but there we go, let that just blend in. So let that dry down a bit now, because anything else I put on there needs to be a sharper edge. And we'll look at the colouring behind here, this area of the sand. Mix up some more eolin and give it a thin coat of that right through. Yeah. There's some quite nice cools coming down into the edge of the sand here, which I'm going to now drop some of the cobalt just onto that there. And just around underneath the boat here, there's quite a bit of shadow. I'll drop in some darker colours there as well, just to get the effect of shadow under the boat. Wash of water all the way down there to the edge. And whatever's been up here is going to reflect down here as well. So when it was above, when we did the sky, we put in some cerulean blue. So we're going to do a little bit of the same here now. I'm going to start off with a touch of the sienna and just drop that in. Not much of it, just a little bit. A little bit of the sienna, just giving it some warmth here, just to get our lights right for the sky. And then come down to the cerulean, and we'll get those blues coming down lightly into the water. There we are. Now these darker colours, which we're going to let trickle a little bit and then let them dry off and come in afterwards with more reflections and lifting out. So this dark colour we made here for the trees earlier on, which was the chrome and ultramarine, with a touch of... Now let's see what we get there. We're something very, very dark here, so let's just get that in all the way along here, this light edge, nice and sharp. And a bit more yellow. So we're going to go over the surface later and make it a bit stronger. At the moment we're just concerned with getting these reflective effects. A darker still. These lovely darks. I'm going down perhaps a tone here in darkness to deliberately make it sharper against that edge. Right, leaving that, we'll come down to this bit, this area here, and again similar colours to over here, a little bit of the aureolin yellow. Just give that a thin wash all the way across there for the moment. And whilst I'm still on these soft areas, there's a bit more blue around here, so I'm going to take in some of that mixture of, while it's still wet, of ultramarine and burnt sienna, and just drop in some of the softer colours there. So ultramarine. And this is our soft painting, this is our underpainting. I'm going to let this dry and then come back into it with the details. In fact, up here in the sky the paint is now dry enough to work on, so I'm going to come back up to there now, right through to here. Quite a warm colour down through the tree. I'm going to take some light red and just work it down through there, a little bit thinner. If we want it bluer, then we have more of blue. If we want it browner, we have more brown, obviously. Up here it wants to be fairly blue. Branches always grow from thick to thinner. Or nearly always. I have noticed a few trees recently, like the palm trees here for instance, where one or two of them, even right outside the front of where I'm working now, strangely enough grow from thin to thick. You think they snap off and fall over, but it's a weird thing to see. You see now how these soft effects seem much lighter. Right down into those roots here. A little bit of dry brushwork scumbling through, and we can now look at some of the texturing of a little bit of tree coming in there. Just rest your hand on the paper slightly. The paper is dry now, so no reason why we can't. This is where you can paint as much detail as you like. You've started loosely, so you can finish as tight as you want. If you start loose, we can finish tight. If you start tight, we can't go loose again. And this is just looking at and through the back of my little digital camera. I can't be out there today on the spot because the light has totally changed and it's just so windy. It would be a very, very different picture than the one that I actually want to achieve. Of course I could go out there and do it. It would be a very, very different picture to the one I actually chose in the beginning. I'm trying to also remember and see where this masking fluid is. And that's one of the beauties of using this Fabio masking fluid, is that it is a greyer colour, so you can actually see it. You can see now the hard edge, the paint, the wet paint going to the dry paint allows me to paint sharp, harder edges. Put as much of this detail as I want. So we'll start working on some of the boat. We've done this darker area here, which unfortunately was off camera, I didn't realise. I'm going to start working now on these posts that are coming down here and reflecting in the water, right up through there. Quinquedrone red, and just go along this edge carefully. Into there like that. All the way along. Goes right the way across into the gunnels of the boat here. Around the edges here. Down that edge, and suddenly we get into that's the post itself, which comes down, broken there, and we can get the effect just by wiggling the brush. Lovely dark shape here, which I'm going to drop in with pure I'm dropping the pure burnt sienna straight away, and then into that drop my ultramarine mixture, the darker mixture, and let that just flow in and around out into the shadows here. Then we let it dry and we can remove the
Oh dear, noise in the background. We can remove the masking fluid. So quite a detailed painting, this one, just to give you an idea, going back to traditional watercolour techniques of how you can work from the back of a digital camera even when the weather goes totally the opposite to what you want. Important to make these studies, important to get the studies done. Either that or have photographs to work from. So this is where we've got to so far with this one. We've done the texturing on the base, got the water reflections, you might lift a little bit out of later. We're working on the boat a bit more, right up into the trees, and we're about to remove the masking fluid. Okay, next is to rub off the masking fluid. Use my handkerchief for this. You see straight away how the light areas are coming out, and it's going to be fun just to tint these back and look at final parts of the composition here. Looks a bit like snow at first, but it will, when we've got them working and tinted with the right colours, it will give us that highlight. It comes down to the water. These background twigs too. We'll just use a little bit of raw sienna on those and tint those in. And around these edges down the bottom here. I can't now see. And around there, these edges down the bottom. Now we've taken the masking fluid away, they require a little bit of work as well. Now to finish off, what I want to do is use a flat brush across this bit, just to get some of these blue greys into there, a bit of dry brushwork. So I'm going to use my half-inch flat, along my half-inch flat, just along this area of the water here. Try some cobalt blue. With a little touch of violet. Just see if that will do the job. Just to drag across onto the sand at the edges. Here. Now what we can do finally is just to lift out a little of the light on here to give an effect of the surface of the water. So if I take that brush and go across clean water, keep working it, keep cleaning the brush, back in again, lift out a bit more, you can actually lift out some of the surface to give us a light back again and give us a feeling of water surface like that. Same there. Keep working it, lift out the paint slightly to give us a feeling of water surface. You see how that's coming now? Keep lifting it out. Let's take a look at some of the wildlife that exists around these little lagoons and some of the mangrove areas. Well, now the weather begins to change as the stronger wind comes and we see the cloud building up. And this sunny weather here, where you've seen me fishing from the rocks earlier on in the holiday, changes to this other much rougher weather, which is still rather exciting and bracing, where we see the waves crashing up between the same place and the rocks later. A great time to get some shots for painting though of spray coming up. Well, that takes us to the end of our actual holiday time there, although I'm going to now, at the end of this film, go on to showing you some other work done back in the studio based on shots that I've taken whilst there. A great holiday that I'd thoroughly recommend, with no problems from the local people at all. The only disturbances we actually found were one or two the foreigners getting a little bit too drunk, but other than that I made some lovely friends, people from abroad as well, who I hope will keep in touch, and we may well go and see them and they come and see us over here too. Now, with all the wonderful resources we have, the shell collection I already had, and using photographs and stills from the film, I'll make up some designs for a 3-panel triptych. We're going to build this up in low relief using filler and PVA glue, and then prime it, and then add gold leaf underneath, especially at the surface of the water where we're getting that lovely reflection. And from then onwards we'll just play and experiment. We'll start with acrylics, maybe move into oils, and maybe even use some oil pastels on the painting as well. Well, here we are back at home now in the studio, and we're going to continue with this Cuban theme and take the 3 panels I was talking about earlier, which you see I've done the design on now, the basic charcoal design, and build up a low relief onto this. And I'm going to use some PVA glue, mixture of that with water and filler mixed together. So mix the water and filler first, then add some PVA to make it really creamy and consistent, but still thick enough to plaster on and layer up. And I'm going to use a painting knife to do that. Remember, the difference between a painting knife and a palette knife is that this is with an angle, so my knuckles won't be touching the canvas when I put the material on. And I shall use other tools to make the textures as well, possibly even use some of the corals I've got to imprint into it, because I want to get as many different coral textures as I can on the surface of this. Once that's done, and some of the fish as well, and the texturing for the sea and the waves on top and so on. Once I've built this up into a low relief, then I shall paint most of it in a dark acrylic undercoat, because I'm going to scumble the lighter colours over the top and let some of the dark show through the textures. A technique I've used before in my films, you've all seen when I've been painting flowers and impressionist paintings, especially those delphiniums. Anyway, this should be quite good fun. I'm going to use material to layer this up in a 2-dimensional theme first, and then paint it, and then gold leaf, and then use acrylics and oils to finish off completely. We may even use some oil pastels as well, because I want this to be a mixed medium work. So really enjoy it. Well, I've just about done the relief of the fish. Next I've got to start building up the coral work in between them. reckon the texturing on these is done far enough now. We've got the fish, the surface water and a lot of the coral. So we'll just take a little in-depth more look at some of the texturing I've done here. The sea urchins, the fish, texture of coral, by using various tools and forks and knives and needles and so on. Right, the filler has now dried, so my next stage is to put on an acrylic undercoat, a primer, and I mixed some deep purple, burnt sienna and black for this. I must paint it right into all of the cracks and crevices, mustn't be any of the white showing at all, quite important, and then we'll be able to work the gold leafing over the top. That's the undercoat painted on, and as soon as this is dry I shall start putting on the gold leafing and metallic foiling. What we're going to do now is the gold leafing, and we're going to use this special glue size for sticking the gold leaf on, and it's a bit like PVA glue. You paint it on, it goes dry, goes semi-transparent, and just at that stage it's tacky, and that's when you put the gold leafing on. We aren't just going to use ordinary gold leafing. I'm actually going to use this metallic foiling, which is even nicer and has a whole variety of metallic colours going through it, as you can see, that should look really nice in the surface of the water as it glistens. Paint the glue on. Any soft brush will do us. I'll take a medium brush of a fair size here because I want to put quite a bit of glue on, and then we want a bristle brush or a slightly stiffer brush to actually brush the gold leaf on once the glue is going dry. So we've applied the glue along the top edges here now, and it's now time to wait until that dries a little bit more and we can't see the white, it goes more transparent, and then we'll try sticking some of the gold leaf on. As you see, I'm not quite waiting for it to go all dry. I'm going to get it on a slightly broken effect. Just place the sheet over, brush it on and brush away any excess. As you brush away the excess, try and brush that excess onto another area where the glue actually is, so that you're using as much of the foil as possible and not wasting any. And you get this lovely effect which I want to get of a broken metallic surface glowing through under my paint here later, shining in different lights and giving this effect of reflected light. Using a nice stiff little bristle brush. The traditional brush for this is a badger hair brush, but you can see these lovely effects we're going to get. Right, that's the gold leafing done to the extent that I want to do it at the top. Now it's a matter of working on with the acrylics. As you can see, it will give me a nice shiny reflective surface in between the waves that I'm going to paint as we look up to the surface of the underneath surface of the sea. Okay, the next stage is to use my acrylics, simple stay wet palette and a palette next to it, and a filbert nylon, not too stiff, not too soft, just enough to get the paint in there and still be able to handle the shapes and coverings that I want to do. I've given it a basic coat of cerulean blue and just been working in a little with some ultramarine in between, and I've worked up to the gold leafing and across it just a little bit. I'm just feathering some of these deeper blue marks in before I go into the next colour. The figures beginning here, the divers, and my gradually moving into my greens, coming down from my ceruleans and the warmer pinks into the lower areas of the water. The basic underpainting of the fish in acrylics is done with the acrylics, and I'm not sure how much further to go really. I was going to go onto the oils, and I'm not certain. I may do a little bit, but in fact the colours are coming out fairly well now. I don't think I've got a lot further to go if I want to keep it loose.
Well, I had finished on this, but actually I've decided just to go back and put in a few more brighter tones and work on it a little bit more with some oil pastels. So I'm just going to put some highlights in and do a little bit of finer work. The sorts of areas I want to do that are around little bits like that. Let's look at that, that lighter colour there, for instance. And we'll just run a little bit of light across it, look, across the surfaces, because we want the light shining from above and putting bands of colour over the fish and the surfaces to get this feeling of sunlight rippling down and shining across. Not too much, just to catch a few bits of sunlight here and there, just to get a little bit more highlighting down in places. So not a lot, just a little bit more colour here and there. I think also a little bit more maybe up in amongst this too, just a little bit of light pastel waving through these areas. And even on something like this fish where we've got a few more golden yellow dots going on, just a bit more texture perhaps. And even the splashings that are going on and reflections just around surface of textures here where the ripples are above the figure. Lighter pinks are just rippling away through here. On a fish like this we've almost got the colours there, but we'll just add a little bit more of the blue to try and pick up some of that lovely vibrant turquoises and beautiful colours that are in that. Just needs a final coat of aerosol varnish just to seal everything off and bring that lovely depth of colour back. We'll also just seal across that light oil pastel as well. The oil pastel never dries, but a little coat of this just to hold it firmly. And there we are, nice brilliance to the painting and depth of colour.
La cucaracha,